Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is often regarded as one of the greatest RPGs of all time. With its clever writing, memorable characters, and intriguing gameplay, it's become a fan favorite among Mario RPG enjoyers. Growing up, this was my favorite game ever, and I've probably played it more times than any other Mario title. Over the years, we've seen many more entries in the Paper Mario franchise, but none have seemed to hold a candle to the design of Thousand Year Door. At least, that's what the community thinks. Much like the Pokemon franchise, sales figures don't exactly indicate what people feel is the best game. If we go by that logic, Sticker Star is better than the first two games, and I don't think I need to explain why that's crazy. So if I have such a positive view of this game, what makes me want to go through it again with such a critical eye? Well, like a few of my favorite games of all time that I've reviewed on this channel, they haven't all held up as much as I thought. Rather, they aren't the perfect games that I once thought they were. So let's take off the nostalgia goggles and look at this game for what it really is. Today, we're going through the entire game and finding out if Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is actually good. The story kicks off with a letter from Princess Peach with a mysterious map enclosed, leading Mario to Rogueport, a nasty town far away from the cheerful Mushroom Kingdom. Peach asks Mario to come to the island in search of a mystical treasure, so Mario and friends hop on a boat straight away. Rogueport's ghetto atmosphere immediately sets the game apart with its grungy alleyways and criminal population. When we arrive, we find a Goomba girl named Goombella being harassed by these strange dudes. If we go and help her, it takes us into the first battle of the game, which effectively acts as a tutorial fight. There isn't really much to learn here though, since the fight ends relatively quickly and Mario escapes to the town with Goombella. Rogueport quickly makes it known that this game will have a slightly more mature theme to it, considering the noose in the middle of the town's plaza. Here, we also meet Toadsworth, who informs us that Peach is gone, of course. Anyway, Goombella tells us that she's also looking for the treasure here, and she knows someone that can help us find it. On the way to meet this person, we get robbed. What a warm welcome. Regardless, we meet Professor Frankly, who after about 100 lines of dialogue tells us to take the map to the legendary door. Entering the Rogueport sewers, we can beat some enemies and make our way to a room and find a black key. This unlocks a chest with some sort of demon inside of it. This introduces us to the curse mechanic in the game, which allows Mario to transform his body into different things. In this case, we gain the ability to transform into a paper plane when standing on these platforms. Flying across, we make our way into the room with the Thousand Year Door. When we step on the center podium, we get a special move called Sweet Treat and upgrade our map, revealing the location of a crystal star. When we go back to Rogueport, Professor Frankly tells us that this crystal star is in Petal Meadows and gives us a badge. On our way to the pipe to Petal Meadows, we have to fight a massive blooper. This boss isn't that hard though. In fact, I'd argue jumping across these platforms to the pipe is harder. But with that done, we've completed the prologue. This definitely is a bit longer than I'd like a prologue to be, and this tends to be a common issue with RPGs. I appreciate that a lot of the tutorials are optional though, especially as someone who has played the game many times before. Entering the pipe takes us to Petal Meadows, a very nice grassy area, much better than Rogueport. Not far from the pipe, we notice a huge dragon fly across the sky and into a castle, the same one we saw on our map. It's clear that these stones in front of us will lead us to the castle, but we can't do anything with them right now, so we move on. Up ahead is Petalburg, a village of Koopas. If we go and meet the mayor, he tells us about the dragon we saw earlier, Hooktail, who has the crystal star. To get to the castle, we have to obtain the sun and moon stones and set them in their pillars to unlock the pipe. Along the way, we meet Koops, who clearly wants to ask us something but is too afraid and leaves. When we arrive at the fortress, there are some enemies to defeat, and then we find a Thwomp who challenges us to a game show? What? He asks a very few easy questions, and if we answer them right, we get to enter a pipe that takes us to the tunnels under the fortress. There are a ton of fuzzies here guarding the two stones, so we beat them and make our way out of the fortress. Heading back to those rock pillars at the start of the chapter, we meet Koops again, who asked to join our party in order to defeat Hooktail and avenge his father, who died fighting the dragon. After joining us, his girlfriend asks him to stay, but Koops, being the honorable man he is, refuses and stays true to his mission. Now we can make our way to the castle and enter the first real dungeon of the game, Hooktail Castle. There are a bunch of cool puzzles in this place and even some interesting lore. At one point, Koops runs into a skeleton of a Koopa who resembles his father. There is a letter on his body which gives us some advice to defeat Hooktail, although at the end of the letter it's made clear that this is not from his father. A little anticlimactic, but at least there is hope for Koops. Later in the dungeon is another one of these black chests that curse us with abilities. This time we get the ability to turn sideways, and also we get a badge that makes our attacks sound like crickets, which just so happens to be Hooktail's weakness. Continuing through the castle, we find a storage room full of treasure. Inside, we meet a mouse named Miss Mouse. She gives us some advice about that cricket badge we found and leaves us with a bunch of items. At this point, all we have to do is find Hooktail's quarters and defeat it. This fight is definitely harder than anything we've seen so far in the game, but as long as we have the cricket badge active, it's not so bad. In fact, we beat Hooktail and make it beg for forgiveness. Of course, this is a trick, and Hooktail heals half of their HP by eating our audience members. Eventually, we beat the dragon for good and it coughs up a Koopa, who happens to be Coop's dad. He had been trapped inside of the dragon's stomach for 10 years and gladly hands over the crystal star he found inside of Hooktail. I don't know how he did it, but okay. Chapter 1 of this game is a strong introduction to all of the game's mechanics, and the characters are interesting enough. It's certainly not anything revolutionary, and it gets a bit repetitive. Fortunately, finishing the chapter reveals one of my favorite parts of the game, the post-chapter segments. We're sent to a cutscene in some futuristic chamber area. We see the same guys who are harassing Goombella at the start of the game bring Princess Peach to their apparent leader named Grotus. The minion reports that someone had obtained the crystal star in Hooktail's castle. That was us. Peach foolishly speaks up and mentions Mario's name, which leads her to getting sent into her room and questioned. Grotus then sends his troops to obtain the crystal star in Boggly Woods and prevent Mario from getting it. From here, we actually get to control Peach briefly, like we got to in the original Paper Mario. This room doesn't actually have any secret exits like that game though, and all there really is a shower. If we try to leave the room, it actually does open for us though, and leads us down a hallway to a room with a massive computer named Tech. It was created by Grotus to be the perfect computer and tells us that it wants to investigate a strange feeling that occurred while it was observing her. Peach is clearly confused and guesses that the computer might be in love with her. I wonder if this has to do with her taking a shower. Tech claims to not understand love and asks Peach to help it understand the concept. In exchange, Tech will let her send emails to Mario. This concludes the segment, but that's not all. We also get a Bowser interlude. The scene switches to Bowser's castle where he learns that Peach has been kidnapped by someone else. He quickly leaves the castle with Kammy Koopa on a mission to double kidnap Princess Peach. Going back to Mario, we see that he receives the email from Peach, and she says that she's safe, but she has no idea where she is or who kidnapped her. She also tells us that whoever took her is looking for the crystal stars and the magic map. Now, we can go back to Rogueport and return to the Thousand-Year Door. The location of the next crystal star is revealed to be in a giant black and white tree. We get automatically taken to Frankly's house, and he tells us that this crystal star is in the Great Boggly Tree, in the Boggly Woods. He also shows us what one of its inhabitants looks like, called a puny. We actually have seen one of these guys before in the sewers, so we have a clue of where to go next. But first, now is a good time to complete any side quests here, and you can meet Luigi, buy some new badges, or even check out the west side of Rogueport. There's a lot to do here, and everyone will have a different experience with this part of the game. But for now, let's move on to the sewers to find the next area. Going to the room where we first saw the puny earlier in the game, we find it and is clearly terrified of us. Once we calm its nerves, he introduces himself as Punio and vaguely informs us that the X-Nauts have been terrorizing his people trying to get the crystal star. The X-Nauts are who took Peach, by the way. Punio then guides us to the pipe that takes us into Chapter 2. Much different from the predictable grasslands of Petal Meadows, Boggly Woods is a mysterious and whimsical location. Right at the beginning, we encounter some of the minions of Grotus, the Shadow Sirens. Despite their job to stop us from progressing, they're too busy arguing with each other to notice that we are Mario, and we move past them. The enemies in this area are distinctly different from anything we've seen so far, and honestly, they can get tough to defend against. Koops is helpful since his attacks don't require jumping like Goombella's, especially if you upgraded him using the Shine Sprite mechanic. Eventually, we come across the Great Tree, which has had its entrance blocked off by some high-tech door. Punio remembers a secret entrance, but can't seem to find where it is. Apparently, we need the wind power of a woman named Madame Flurry to clear the way, so we set off to find her. When we arrive at her house, Punio asks her to come help, but she doesn't want to go outside without her favorite necklace that she lost. At the start of the chapter, we actually overheard the Shadow Sirens arguing about a necklace, so we make our way back to them. On our way back, they conveniently remembered that they have a picture of what Mario looked like the whole time, but at this point it doesn't matter because we're here to fight them anyway. This fight is actually quite difficult compared to what we faced before, and each sister has different ways of attacking you. Beating them causes them to run away and drop the necklace we need. We return it to Flurry, and she finally emerges out of her room wearing it, and nothing else. She joins our party, and using her ability to blow air, we enter the next dungeon of the game, the Great Bogly Tree. Inside, we fight some X-Nauts and then meet some of the Punies. We learn that the Puny Elder and Punio's sister have been imprisoned here somewhere in the tree. There are a few rooms to get through until we finally reach these jail cells that imprison the 90 Punies, the Puny Elder, and Punio's sister. We can't get them out without the cell keys, so for now we head to the next room where we find Miss Mouse once again. She gives us a clue about the Crystal Star and then leaves. Defeating an X-Naut here gives us the red key, which unlocks the cell holding the Puny Elder. Going back to the main entrance, 10 of the Punies join our party to help free their friends. The main mechanic of this dungeon happens to be this Pikmin-esque gameplay where you command an army of Punies and complete puzzles surrounding them. In order to control them, we need to use this Puny orb that the Elder gave us. And so, we place the orb into the pedestal here that requires 10 Punies to activate, and we move down into the tree. There's a bunch of cool puzzles here, although some can be a little annoying and finicky. At one point, we reach a floor that has 2 rooms filled with enemies. To the left, there's 100 enemies, but to the right, there's only 10, one less enemy than we have Punies. If we defeat all 10 of them, we can get the blue key, which unlocks the prison cell holding the 90 other Punies. We backtrack there, free them, and now we have 101 Punies to take on that room to the left with 100 enemies. After the battle, we get tricked by Grotus's minion Lord Crump into getting stuck in a cage. Fortunately, we can go into paper mode and escape. After solving a puzzle or two, getting new boots, and freeing the Punies that got captured with us, we can go deeper into the tree. Moving into the final area of the tree, we find the Crystal Star, but Lord Crump appears and takes it. He begins a 5-minute timer on a bomb that will destroy the Great Tree, although this is more than enough time as the tree is fairly linear. Right as we make it to the exit, the Puny Elder prevents Lord Crump from escaping and forces him to stop the bomb timer and challenge us to a battle. This boss is not really difficult at all besides his stomp move, so we beat him and get the second Crystal Star. Like last time, we get a Peach segment, and it begins with Grotus receiving the news of being defeated in Bogly Woods. We also learn that Grotus already has 1 Crystal Star in his possession. Peach then appears, and we get to walk to Tech's room again. In this segment, Tech wants to dance with Peach, but seeing as it's a computer, it creates a holographic copy of her, and Peach dances with herself. After this, Peach sends another email to Mario, and then we cut to Bowser. He seems to be 1 step behind us and is trying to find Peach in Petalburg. After a very fun and also random minigame based on Super Mario Bros., he makes it there and starts speaking to a poster of Peach, thinking it actually was her. This is quite literally the definition of losing aura. Back to Mario, we get Peach's email and then head back to Rogueport and to the Thousand Year Door. The next Crystal Star seems to be in the sky? Back at Frankly's, he tells us that we need to keep collecting all of the Crystal Stars to break some seal on a Thousand Year Door, which I thought was kind of obvious at this point. He doesn't really know why the door was sealed in the first place, nor does he know why the ancient city underneath Rogueport was destroyed. But what he does know is that the next Crystal Star is in the flying city of Glitzville. Getting there won't be as simple as other places though, since we need to get a hard-to-find blimp ticket from Don Pianta, a mob boss in Rogueport. After doing a bunch of side quests, we can find a guy who tells us how to find the boss. We have to buy a dried shroom and then a dizzy dial from the West Side shop. The clerk will then ask us our favorite color, which we should answer yellow. This allows us to see Don Pianta. At first, he refuses our request, but since we mentioned that we want to save Peach, he'll give the ticket to us with one condition. We bring back his daughter and one of his associates who seem to have eloped. For you kids out there, that means they ran away to get secretly married without permission. We find the 2 lovers at the pier of Rogueport, and the associate Frankie is ready to turn himself into the boss, but Francesca wants to leave on a boat to escape her father. Since we can't really get them to come back, we go tell Don Pianta where they are, but they end up showing up anyway, and they apologize to him. At this point, he doesn't really care what they do, and he tells them to leave and do whatever they want. The Don gives us the ticket, and we can finally set off to Glitzville. This is arguably the fan favorite chapter, which you'll soon understand why. Unlike other chapters, there isn't much ground to cover at all before the main area. Everything in this chapter happens within Glitzville, but more specifically inside of the Glitz Pit. This is a fighting arena, which is the city's main attraction. When we arrive, we get to see the current champion, Rock Hawk, finishing off an opponent. After the fight, we notice that his belt has the Crystal Star on it, so logically the only way we can get the Crystal Star is by becoming the champion ourselves. We find our way to the promoter Grubba, and he allows us to enter as a fighter. He gives us a new fighter name though, the Great Gonzalez. After showing us around, he calls his assistant Jolene to take us to our room. Here, we can arrange fights, which is the main mechanic of this chapter. In each fight, you'll get a special request for actions in battle, and if you don't obey, you won't move up the ranks. For the first few battles, not much happens, at least until we learn that the hot dog stand outside is selling a new type of dog using an egg from an exotic island. When we actually go to it, it's clearly not a normal egg, and it even joins our party. A few battles later, we fight an enemy that is literally invincible. invincible. It doesn't matter what we do here, so we just end the battle quickly by running. When we return to the locker room, the egg is gone, but then a little Yoshi walks up to us. Apparently, he could hear everything going on from inside the egg and knows all about our quest to become the top fighter. Since we did a good job at raising him, he thanks us by joining our party for good and even lets us name him. Also, the color of the Yoshi depends on how long it took for it to hatch. With this new partner though, we can actually defeat those unbeatable enemies and move up on the ranks. After reaching 8th place, we get an email from a random person called X telling us to go to the watering hole outside Glitzpit. As a kid, and honestly until recently, I didn't know what watering hole meant, and I would get stuck on this part for a while. Basically, we just need to go to the juice bar and obtain the super hammer. I don't know why they couldn't just say juice bar. With this, we can destroy those big yellow blocks we've been seeing around, and after going around the Glitz Pit destroying these and exploring, we find an article explaining that the crystal star in the belt is actually a fake. Jolene finds us though and confiscates the article from us. After getting 7th place, we get another email, but this time it's not from the X person who emailed us before. This is clearly a threat from another person telling us to stop sticking our nose where it doesn't belong, or else. A few fights later, we shockingly run into Bowser of all people, who managed to catch up to us. Technically, this is a boss fight and Bowser has a few different attacks like usual, but it isn't too hard and we beat him along with our 4th place opponent. Back in the locker room, we get another email from X telling us to go to the phone booth outside. But as we leave, Rockhawk comes up to us and suggests that we don't even think about challenging him. Anyway, we go to the phone booth and get a storage key, which we are immediately emailed about by X to use the key to open the storage room. Kinda crazy how fast they realize we got the key, but we enter the storage and find Miss Mouse. Clearing out the storage allows us to access a vent so we can eavesdrop on a conversation between Grubba and Jolene. Here, we learn more about the strange disappearances of fighters, and that Grubba probably knows something about the whereabouts of the real crystal star. We go back to the locker room and win our 3rd place fight, but when we come back, we get another threat from an anonymous emailer telling us to stop looking around for the crystal star, or else. As we prepare for the second match, Jolene brings us a cake from one of our admirers, but since I've played this game before, I know that this cake is poisoned. After winning the 2nd place fight, we can finally fight for 1st place and become the #1 contenders for the title. But after winning, X tells us to remove the posters of ourselves from the lobby. This helps us find another key, and then we get an email from X telling us to go to the 2nd floor of the storage room. Here, we find 2 of the fighters who went missing, and one of them warns us to not go around the ring when no one is there. For now, we have to prepare for our title match, but when it begins, we get tricked into getting locked into the minor league locker room. Somehow, we manage to escape and make it to our fight in time. Rockhawk is a pretty cool fight, and he hits hard, but we defeat him and become the champion. Afterwards though, we're taken to the champion's room and overhear something in the vents. If we go inside, we can hear Grubba thinking aloud, talking about how he's the one who's been making the fighters go missing, and that we're next. Once Grubba leaves the room, we break in and steal a paper from his desk detailing something about a machine under the ring powered by the crystal star. This machine apparently drains the energy from fighters, and it's clear that Grubba has been using it on those people who disappeared. As we finish reading the paper, Grubba comes back into his office and we confront him. He runs away immediately, so we go to the ring. Here, he reveals the real crystal star. Using its power, he transforms into Macho Grubba, and we start the final boss of the chapter. Not only does Grubba have a ton of health, but he gives himself an extra action per turn, which he uses to buff himself. There's actually a good amount of strategy in this fight, and just spamming your strongest moves blindly won't be efficient. After a long battle, we beat Grubba and he returns to normal. Jolene enters the room and thanks us for defeating him. She reveals that she had a brother named Mush, who became a fighter to support their family. One day, he went missing, so Jolene started working at the Glitz Pit to investigate. At some point, she accidentally saw Grubba transform, so she enlisted our help through the X alias, in hopes that we could defeat him. She then asked Grubba the whereabouts of Mush, and even though he says that he's gone, he suddenly appears as a beam of light from the crystal star. After this, Jolene lets us get the crystal star, and we finish the chapter. This chapter was one of the coolest narratives ever told in a Mario RPG game, and while it is simple gameplay-wise, it's incredibly interesting to see the writing in a game like this show through. The game cuts to the Peach segment, and we see Grotus talking with the Shadow Sirens about their new weapon that they're going to use to defeat Mario. Then, we get control of Peach and head over to Text Room. This time, Peach is instructed to ask Grotus some questions for it, but obviously we can't go there like this, so we get disguised as an X-Naut. When we go to Grotus and ask the questions, he doesn't really give us much besides that their goal is to conquer the world. Peach then talks with Tech about the nature of enjoying the world despite the pain that inhabits it. We send an email to Mario about the X-Naut's plan and then cut to Bowser. He somehow has managed to regress in progress toward the crystal stars and shows up at the Puny's doorstep. He has a short chat with the Elder about how they gave the crystal star to Mario, and we cut back to Glitzville. As we get sent off, Jolene says that she'll run the Glitz Pit and that Blackhawk is going to fight fairly from now on. Back in Rogueport, we head to the Thousand Year Door and see the next crystal star is in some creepy place to the west of Rogueport. We catch up with Frankly and he tells us that the next crystal star is in Twilight Town. If we manage to find the pipe that goes to it, it just spits you out. The only way to get through it is by speaking to a man from Twilight Town named Darkly. He writes Mario's name on him because for some reason that's the condition to be allowed in, and he also writes the partners' names on themselves too. I don't know if they ever explained this, but whatever. When we enter Twilight Town, it's almost as if it's a completely different game. The mayor of the town greets us and informs us that the townspeople have been cursed to turn into a pig every time the bell rings at the creepy steeple. We also figure out that the crystal star is in said creepy steeple. As we try to leave town, the gatekeeper says that we need the mayor's permission, but when we go back into his house, he gets turned into a pig, so we go back to the gatekeeper and he also gets turned into a pig. At the very least, now no one's stopping us from leaving. On the trail, we get a black key and a storage key. We can't progress any further for now, but if we use the storage key back at the shop in Twilight Town, we can get another curse and be able to transform into a paper tube. The curse allows us to roll our way to Twilight Forest. This place has a lot of enemies, but once we get through, we arrive at the creepy steeple. There's a ton of rooms with secret items to get here, but soon after arriving, we get to fight a mini-boss called Atomic Boo. There's not really much to this fight, so we beat it and continue exploring the steeple. On the top floor, we find a Duplighost who has been behind all of the pig transformations. We start the battle against him, and eventually he turns into a copy of Mario. We easily win the fight and actually get the Crystal Star, making this the shortest chapter in all of Paper Mario history. Well, not really. We gain control of the clone of Mario, leaving us safe to assume that the monster somehow stole our body and then switched our consciousness into the clone when he was defeated. The game cuts to the Shadow Sirens arguing once again. This time, Beldam is screaming at Vivian about losing the bomb they intended to use against Mario. Going back to the gameplay, we unfortunately have to walk through this forest again with no partner, and by the time we arrive, the fake Mario appears from the sky and makes fun of us. He gives us a chance to get our body back, but only if we can guess his name. Obviously, there's no way of guessing his name, so we run away to Twilight Town. Here, we find Vivian and help her find the bomb she was looking for. Unfortunately, the bomb is broken anyway. Vivian asks us our name, but we literally cannot speak our name due to this curse. We give her the rundown of the situation, and Vivian decides to help us get back everything we lost. She doesn't even want to go back to the Shadow Sirens because they bully her all the time, especially since she started identifying as a woman instead of a man. Anyway, she joins our party and we head back to Creepy Steeple to find out what the monster's name could be. Here, we find the letter P, and also a bird who talks to himself. Fortunately for us, the bird says the monster's name is Dupless. Now, we can go back to Dupless and tell him his name. He freaks out and then runs back to the creepy steeple. In the remake, we have a nicely placed pipe in Twilight Town that takes us straight there. In the original, have fun running back for the third time. He meets us at the top of the creepy steeple once again and we battle. Since our partners are stupid and can't see that the fake Mario clearly has no soul in his eyes, we have to fight against them too. Vivian actually learns that we're Mario from them and she leaves us as well. So yeah, we're truly alone. Fortunately, she comes to her senses and actually does come back to join our party for real. This fight is truly nothing new because Dupless fights with all of our partners' own moves. After we beat him, the disguise comes off and we turn back into Mario. Our partners realize that they were tricked and they still have the nerve to question why Vivian is helping us. Regardless, Mario vouches for her and lets her join the squad. Now the chapter really ends. The game cuts to Peach being called to Tech's room. The computer seems conflicted with its mission and Princess Peach, but it tells her not to worry about it and asks Peach to answer some questions. In reality, these questions were just Tech's way of informing Peach of Grodus' plan to revive the ancient demon behind the Thousand Year Door. The game cuts to Bowser trying to go back to Glitzville, but after he crash lands into the ocean, we get to play Super Bowser Bros once again. He makes it back to Rogueport after a long swim, and Cammy Koopa greets him decorated with gear from the Glitz Pit. Going back to Mario, we head to the Thousand Year Door and see that the next crystal star is on a tropical island. When we talk to Frankly, we discuss the email from Peach, which told us all about the Thousand Year Door's secrets. Furthermore, we figured that the crystal stars might not even be needed to open the door in the first place, but they definitely are needed to reseal the demon. Finally, Frankly says that the crystal star is in Keelhaul Key. Getting there won't be so simple though, because we need to find someone to sail across the sea with us. But first, at this point in the game, we can get Miss Mouse as a partner, so we do that real quick and then continue with our search. We find a man named Flavio who gathers his ship and crew together for a voyage. Also, this is obviously Lord Crump. Anyway, the ship can't sail without a navigator, and the only person anyone knows is Admiral Admiral Bobbery, but his whereabouts are unknown. If we look around, we can find a man who looks the part, but denies that he's actually him. After pestering him enough, he finally gives in and lets us ask him what we want. Despite this, he refuses to sail the sea ever again. If we go to the man at the bar, he tells us Bobbery's story. Bobbery was once married to a beautiful woman named Scarlet, but since Bobbery was a sailor, he was away from home for long periods. Scarlet never complained though, and always waited faithfully for Bobbery's return. But unfortunately, one cold winter day, Scarlet fell ill. Bobbery, at sea on a long, lonely voyage, knew nothing of his bride's suffering. By the time he returned, Scarlet had succumbed to the illness. Of course, Bobbery blamed himself, saying that if he were not at sea, he could have nursed her to health. He has never gone out to sea since. The bartender leaves us with one last thing, a letter from Scarlet. She wanted Bobbery to read it if she ended up succumbing to the illness. Inside, she wrote her final wishes to Bobbery, thanking him for all the love he was able to give her. Lastly, she says that Bobbery's love for the sea is just as important as his love for her, and to not lose both of his life's loves. I was only paraphrasing here, but his backstory still hits hard to this day. Even as a kid, I felt the pain of Bobbery's situation. Back to our objective though, Bobbery willingly joins our crew and we set off for Keelhaul Key. This trip takes a few in-game days, so while we sail, I'd like to briefly thank all of my subscribers and my viewers for making this first year on YouTube an absolute joy. Right now, we're really close to 5k subs, and I'd love to hit 10k subs within the next few months. If you want to join the Jacob Cruz channel, I'd love to have you. And if you want to support me even more, I have a Patreon in the top link of the description. Anyway, it seems like the ship is being attacked by fire ghosts, and we ended up getting shipwrecked at Keelhaul Key. The crew establishes a little small settlement, but Bobbery and 2 others of the crew are missing. If we progress beyond the town, we stumble across these missing crewmates being attacked by flame ghosts. Bobbery asks us to save the others while he fights them. Later on, we find him injured in a tree, and he seems to be on death's doorstep. He asks us to get him a Chocola Cola. Flavio seems to have this drink, but we have to barter a coconut in order to get it. Kind of annoying, but whatever. Bobbery gets his drink and then seemingly dies? Just kidding, he fell asleep. After this, he joins our party for real. In order to progress past this point, we get Flavio to give us a special gem that unlocks a cave entrance. This is where most of the chapter takes place, but honestly, I don't have anything special to say here. It's just a long dungeon. We get a new curse which lets us turn into a boat, and later on, we found a ton of toads who got stuck on a ship in the cave. Oh, and Francesca and Frankie are here too, those 2 Piantas from earlier who got married. Just past this area, we find the being who controls this cave, the pirate Cortez. For such an underwhelming chapter in my opinion, this boss fight is actually pretty sick. After we beat him, he informs us that we literally cannot defeat him because he's already dead. He even offers us his treasure since guarding it is just so boring anyway. But we want the crystal star, and fortunately for us, he doesn't even like it that much and just gives it to us. The chapter isn't over just yet though, because as we leave Keelhaul Key, Lord Crump loses the disguise and unleashes an attack on the island. Needing some help, we go to Cortez asking for his ship. Flavio strikes a deal with the pirate offering his skull gem in exchange for Cortez sailing his ship. We set out against Lord Crump's ship and force them into a battle on the sea. This is a mini boss fight with Lord Crump and his minions, and once we beat him, the chapter really ends. The game cuts to Grotus, who is clearly annoyed that his minions keep failing him. He asks the Shadow Sirens to try and stop Mario one more time. Then, we see Peach enter Tech's room, who asks her to sneak into Grotus's room and steal a data disk. In order to do this, we need to make an invisibility potion and drink it. Of course, the potion only makes Peach herself invisible, so she loses the dress and makes her way to Grotus's room. Peach easily completes the objective and we go back to the lab room. Tech tells us to drink the green potion to instantly turn back normal. Of course, he didn't remind Peach to put her dress back on before drinking it, but luckily, she remembered to do it anyway. Going to Bowser, he's in Twilight Town where he finds Crump looking for the Super Bob-omb that the Shadow Sirens lost earlier in the game. The 2 get into it and each call their armies. Crump throws the broken bomb at Bowser and it bounces off his head. Stupidly, Bowser celebrates by breathing fire all over the bomb and exploding it. We switch to Mario and head to the Thousand-Year Door. Frankie reveals that the location of the next crystal star is in Poshley Heights, a place only accessible by taking the XS Express train. Theoretically, this journey should be easy, but we learn that there's a lot more to it than it seems. We try and ask Don Pianta about how to get one of these tickets to board the train, but he's literally sick with loneliness ever since Francesca left him. So we go back to Keelhaul Key to hopefully bring her back. When we encounter them though, Francesca seems to have lost her wedding ring and gets into an argument with Frankie. In order to apologize, she asks him to say "I I love you 100 times. And he actually does. Anyway, we find the ring and bring the two back to Rogueport. The boss recovers and gives us the ticket, but also retires and makes Frankie the boss. With the ticket, we can get on the XS Express and start Chapter 6. On the train, we have to commute 3 days straight until we arrive at Poshley Heights. I'm not sure how slow this train runs, but damn, this place must be far away. In our cabin, we find a note on the floor saying that we should get off the train now or a sticky, yummy doom awaits. Hey, yo, what? Well, we explore some of the cabins and greet the people on the train, and then in the main dining area, we find a bunch of people gathered together. Apparently, the chef here had his pot of stew stolen, and a detective named Pennington wants to figure out who took it. We explore the train looking for who took it by following these drops of stew into this toad's room. So we catch the culprit and speak more with Pennington about the threat we received this morning. When we leave the room, the time turns to afternoon. In the cabin right over, we find a Bob-omb family arguing about what to get their son Bub for his birthday. After speaking to the kid, we figure out that he wants to be a train engineer when he grows up, and that he wants the train engineer's autograph. So we fulfill the kid's wishes, and then the train turns to night. If we speak to the conductor, he tells us that when he was handing out blankets, he was one short, meaning that someone on the train boarded without a ticket. What we have to do next isn't exactly obvious, but we go to the only train cabin without a resident and then use Vivian's hide ability inside it. This reveals a toad ghost who the conductor gave a blanket to for some reason. The ghost asks us to bring him his diary from a storage car in exchange for our blanket back. So we give the stuff back to the toads and then we go to bed. In the morning, we learn that there have been multiple items stolen from the passengers. Detective Pennington figures that since one of them, Zip Toad, has been missing all morning, that he must be behind it. Using our hide ability with Vivian, we trick the toad into revealing himself, and then we force him to give back the stuff. The train then announces that it will be stopping at Riverside Station this afternoon. When Zip Toad gets off the train, he reveals that he's actually dupeless and escapes. We give back all the stolen items and then get off the train. It seems like the drawbridge past here has been lifted, so the train cannot progress. Our job is to go into the Riverside Station and find the switch to lower the bridge. This place is a bit of a mini dungeon, and we get a bunch of badges, items, and even the ultra boots here. When we make it to the top floor, we find a bunch of creatures swarming the lever to lower the bridge. So we scare them away, flip the switch, and then board the train once again and sleep. The next day, it's eerily quiet. When we go to speak to the conductor, the train gets swarmed by these same black creatures we saw at the station. We make our way to the top of the train and try our best to knock off these creatures. Here, we find all the train's passengers captured by this monster called Smorg. This is the main boss of the chapter, and it's only vulnerable once all of its arms are taken out. This thing hits like a truck, but once we defeat it, we save the passengers and make it to Poshley Heights. We explore the city a bit and then head to Poshley Sanctum. Pennington lets us in since he has the key, and the crystal star is literally right here, but it gets stolen by Beldam already. However, Pennington tells us that the star is fake anyway, and the other is somewhere else in the sanctum. The penguin knows where the star is, but refuses to tell us, so we have to solve a little puzzle first. We make it to the back of the sanctum, and there's another massive room with some hidden items, and the real crystal star. We pick it up, return to Pennington, and the game cuts to Grotus very angry that his minions fell for the fake crystal star. Peach then gets called to Tech's room, and the computer voices its concerns with whether or not it should be obeying orders or protecting Princess Peach. It asks Peach to escape from this place, as it has learned every detail of Grotus's plan. Tech tells her everything, and that the place where she's imprisoned is the moon. Right as it's about to help her escape, Grotus appears and shuts down Tech and wipes its memory. Before it's gone, it sends the last email to Mario, and the game cuts to Bowser. At this point, he's just sad about failing everything he's tried so far, but then he learns of a secret underground chamber, and we make our way there with the final level of Super Bowser Bros. He makes it there and discovers it's actually Rockhawk's secret training room. Bowser completely squashes him, and the fake Crystal Star Championship breaks. Chapter 6 is one of the most popular chapters in all of Paper Mario, and that's for a good reason. It takes a slight step back from how the game has approached storytelling and goes for a unique style of pacing with the 3 days on the train concept. It's definitely not the pinnacle of gameplay, as some people might say, but I do love this chapter every time I play through this game. We cut back to Mario arriving in Rogueport and get the email from Peach. After completing some side quests and getting the Ultra Hammer, we head to the Thousand Year Door and see the last crystal star is on the moon. Speaking to Frankly, he confirms this and asks us to give him some time to figure out how to get there. This is the perfect time to complete any side quests you've missed until now. But when Frankie completes his research, he finds that we need to go to Far Outpost to use a cannon to blast to the moon. Fortunately for us, there's a pipe to Far Outpost, so we take it and start Chapter 7. We make it through the snowy region and reach the outpost. The Bob-ombs are not keen of mentioning their cannon to non-Bob-ombs, but we get Bobbery to negotiate with the mayor. We learn that to operate the cannon, we need to find Gold Bob and General White. Now, this is arguably the worst part of the entire game. If you ask anyone what their number one pet peeve is when it comes to RPGs and JRPGs, there's a high chance they'll say backtracking. We already have experienced some backtracking in the Thousand Year Door so far, with chapters 1, 2, and especially 4, but this search for General White has you backtrack to everywhere in the game. Assuming you've activated all the fast travel pipes in the game, it's not really that bad, but as a kid, I didn't really know about these pipes, so I wasted so much time. In the remake though, this quest is a bit more streamlined. Anyway, after looking all over for General White, we find him sleeping in his house back at Far Outpost. This is actually why the quest is so annoying, because you do all that and he's just back where we started. Okay, enough complaining. We wake him up and he helps us set up the cannon. In a really cool cutscene, we get blasted off to the moon and begin our search for Peach and the final crystal star. The movement speed here is slower and the physics are quite moon-like. We trek across the land and eventually reach the Exnant Fortress. There's a bunch of rooms for us to explore and enemies to beat. There's even a teleporter room that'll take you back to Rogueport, which explains how the Exnants could go back and forth. Along the way through the fortress, we find a code that is used to unlock a door to another one of these Thwomp quizzes from all the way back in chapter 1. If we win, we get an elevator key. We can make our way to the floor Peach was on now, but she's not there, so we progress and find a small room that needs some key cards that we've collected so far through the fortress. Going through takes us to a new area with a bunch of machinery. All the way at the end, Lord Crump is waiting for us, but we've already beaten him a few times before, so this isn't anything new. That being said, he hits hard and has a lot of health. Taking him down gets us the final crystal star, and the game cuts to Bowser since we don't really get to know what's happening with Peach. He's in Poshley Heights searching for the crystal star, and he also gets tricked by the fake crystal star. Fortunately for him, one of his minions says that Mario collected all the stars and is heading for the Thousand Year Door. Maybe for once, he won't be late to the party. We don't get teleported back to Rogueport when we're with Mario again, and Tech's room is now unlocked, so we go check on it. The computer is barely functioning, but it still retains some information about Peach. It asks Mario to save her, and tells him that Peach is with Grotus in the Palace of Shadow. Tech tells us to go to the teleporter room and return to Rogueport. There's barely enough power for it to be functional though, but Tech offers its last bit of power to keep it working. This moment is surprisingly emotional and is one of the times the remake completely redoes the original by including a new piece of music that better fits the mood, you know, instead of the insanely upbeat Exnant Fortress soundtrack. This chapter overall is not very long, but it's memorable for the sake of its setting and amazing soundtrack. But back in Rogueport, we're about to enter the final area of the game. Frankly tells us that someone entered the Thousand Year Door before us, so we hurry there and open it, starting chapter 8, the last one. The Palace of Shadow is unlike any place we've encountered so far, and we're faced with long corridors filled with enemies and obstacles. There's a few segments to get through, but getting past this first part leads us to an area resembling an underground city. We can't actually enter the main building here yet, so we progress into some very long hallways with difficult enemies. At the end, we see a huge dragon. This is Gloomtail, and he's mad that we defeated his sister Hooktail. This boss fight is the third most powerful in the game, and has many ways of hurting you. Defeating him lands you the Star Key, which lets us fully explore that building in the underground city. We place the star key inside of the pedestal and it starts a sequence where we have to solve riddles in 8 different rooms. I've always enjoyed solving puzzles and riddles, so this is one of my favorite parts of this chapter and this game as a whole. Finishing these riddles gets us these keys that we use to reveal a new way to progress through the palace. On our way, we meet Frankly? In reality, it's just the Shadow Sirens and Dupless. This fight is surprisingly hard, and if you let them charge up, they can do some of the strongest attacks in the game against you. Beating them lets us progress through the final bit of puzzles and hallways. Eventually, we make it to the throne room. Grotus appears and he introduces himself. He reveals that his goal was actually for us to gather all of the crystal stars so he can take them from us here. Grotus himself is not actually that strong aside from some good magic spells. His defense comes from these creatures that we need to take down before actually hitting him. If you were to assume this is the final boss, well, it would be kind of an underwhelming fight, because we beat him with relative ease. However, after the fight, Grotus reveals Peach and then surprises us with a lightning attack. Right when he's about to finish us off, Bowser appears from the ceiling and lands on Grotus. This is also not the actual final boss fight, but we still have to fight him. Aside from his higher stats, this is pretty much identical to his chapter 3 fight, with the difference being the addition of Kammy Koopa. Taking them down lets us continue to chase after Grotus, who seems to have taken Peach further into the palace. In the final room, we find Grotus and Peach in front of a coffin. This place holds the soul of an ancient demon that was sealed 1,000 years ago. The Shadow Queen awakens and darkness falls upon the land. Grotus offers Peach as a vessel for the Queen, and she takes control of her. Grotus commands the newly merged Queen to destroy Mario, but she does not take orders and one-taps him with lightning. Beldum appears, and we learn that she was the one truly responsible for bringing back the Shadow Queen. The Queen asks us to join her, but we refuse, and we begin our final battle. This battle is going to be a long one, and she has basically double the HP of any other boss we fought in the game. The first stage is relatively straightforward, but getting her health down is when things get really going. In this new form, we literally cannot hurt her. After a few turns, she regains all her health by taking the souls of our audience members. The game cuts out of the battle, and right as we seem to be unable to do anything to her, the crystal stars emerge and hear the wishes of all the people we've met so far, and like a true JRPG final boss, weakens the Shadow Queen. But just because she's vulnerable now doesn't mean she's weak by any means. This fight requires correct use of your partner's abilities along with items and star powers. But after a long fight, we do the impossible and defeat the Shadow Queen. We help Peach to her feet, and Frankly appears out of nowhere with a chest. Looks like there really was a legendary treasure. The game cuts to a send-off with all of our partners, and when we leave, we finally get to speak with Peach. She explains what she went through and thanks Mario for all he's done. And with the sunset view of Rogueport, we cut to the last scene of Mario and Luigi. While they're talking, Mario gets an email from Goombella. She tells him that she's been working with Frankly and researching more about Rogueport. She also gives us the rundown of what all of our partners have been doing since defeating the Shadow Queen. Funnily enough, Grotus, Lord Crump, and Tech are somehow all still alive, but they're not really planning on doing anything bad. We cut back to Mario getting visited by Peach and Toadsworth, and this time she's found a real treasure map. With this, the game truly ends and the credits roll. That was a lot. And going through this, I almost forgot why I was looking at this game again. Well, there's not much to say that hasn't already been said, but I'll just gather my final thoughts here. I'll say that Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is absolutely not a perfect game. In fact, I'd challenge that its level design and pacing isn't the greatest at times. But besides that, I don't have many criticisms that make it really feel like a bad game at all. Its writing is amongst the best I've ever seen from Nintendo, alongside its phenomenal art and music. The battle system is easily my favorite throughout the entire Paper Mario franchise, and I feel like this is where the game's peaked in terms of balancing storytelling and engaging gameplay. While this game is far from the perfect JRPG that fans love to masquerade it as, I believe that it's nearly the best RPG that Nintendo has ever released. So with that being said, is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door actually good? Yes. The real question is, does the series get any better from here? Thank you so much for watching. This is a video I've been holding off on making for over a year, but I'm glad I finally got it done. I know this was a long one, but I think that one of my favorite games of my childhood deserves the love. Again, if you want to support the channel, please subscribe and leave a like and comment your thoughts on the game. And please consider checking out my Patreon. I make videos like this multiple times a month, and I pride myself on releasing authentic long-form content. I'll see you guys in the next one.